Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere. This is not Barry White, but it's Zach Couples with episode number 17 of the Movement Debrief. And today, we're going to talk about a couple things. What are those things? I'm glad you asked. First thing we'll talk about is how, or the challenges of getting your peeps to effectively execute their home exercise program. And then the other thing will be, what does physical therapy look like 25 years from now? But before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping. Did all of you beautiful, sexy people see my blog this past week? I apologize about this because my throat's a little, but this past week was the links for the past month that I give all of my newsletter subscribers, and learned a lot of cool things this past month. Jan Lemire, man, that guy just kills. I really liked his travel pieces that he was talking about in terms of eastward and westward. Taught me some things that I definitely plan on incorporating anytime I cross multiple time zones. And I was thoroughly impressed by the things that he is doing. So go check him out. And if you want those goodies every Friday, like that way you can brag to your friends about, hey, did you see this article, this article? Go and say like, no man, I usually only get those once a month. And then you can tell them, well, guess what? I get them once a week. Deal with it. You know what I mean? So like go to zachcouples.com and sign up for that newsletter, and you'll get those goodies. You'll get a lot of other goodies too, like a free acute to chronic workload calculator, but that's neither here nor there. But that was this week's blog. Other housekeeping things. I have 2 talks coming up. You guys need to know about this. If you don't from the last one, I am going to be in the land of China in late October for like a week. And then also, mark your calendars. I believe it's September 18th and 19th of 2018. So like a year from now, we're going to be in Seattle. 2 days with this joker right here. And we're going to, who knows the type of things we'll be talking about. Probably 30% inappropriate, 70% practical application, 100% fun. And of course we're going to get after it after it's all said and done. So put that on your calendar as well. It's going to be in Seattle. I don't know the location as of yet, but it's a 2-day. Deal with it. That's all for housekeeping that I'm aware of right now. My Labor Day was outstanding, kind of, except I was getting a little bit of this, but I was just chilling, prepping for those talks, and I did a couple cool hikes. I went to Canyon de Chelly in in Arizona, which was way out east, in Chinle, not to be confused with Chun-Li from Street Fighter. Very beautiful. And then my car battery died, and I had to go to Flagstaff, which is like 3 hours back towards where I live in Page. And I did a really cool hike there called Inner Basin. So if you are hikers and you're in those areas, check both those places out. Anyways, let's debrief, shall we? So these are both Q&A questions from my man Rohan P. He's awesome about asking some great questions. And if you guys have questions as I'm debriefing you, please fire away. So the first question he asked was, what do you feel, Zach, is the hardest aspect of a home exercise program for patients? That's a phenomenal question, Rohan. I hope I pronounced your name right. What I think the hardest piece about doing a home exercise program is actually doing it. That's hands down. That's, if there's anything that I have to battle with, not necessarily battle with, but if there's anything that you are going to have to ensure happens, is that they physically do it. And well, first off, let's talk about why people might not do a home exercise program. Well, first reason is maybe they don't think it's going to work. So That could be one reason, right? Why would I waste my time doing something if I don't think it's going to be helpful? Okay, so if that's the case, make sure you give them stuff that's helpful. I think another possible reason why they may not do it is you're giving them too many things to do. Why is it? I've seen a lot of people with total knee arthroplasties as of late, and every time they come from the hospital, they say, well, I'm doing my 5 exercises and they hurt. You know, because you get the quad set, you get the heel slide, you get the straight leg raise, you get the long arc quad, and you get the ankle pumps. And it's like, that's too many things. If you're giving your peeps 5 things to do, they're not going to get it done. Because what we're really doing when we're establishing a home exercise program is habit formation, and we are altering and trying to establish a healthy habit for the individual to do. And it has to be a practical thing. If you try to do too many things at once, you're not going to get anywhere, and the habit will not stick. And so when I'm giving my peeps home exercise programs, you want to give them the minimal effective dose. And moreover, the dose that they are going to be able to consistently implement. Okay, Danny, I hear you, girl. I will answer that question. That's a really good question, by the way, after I answer this one, which I'm almost done. So, where was I? Okay, so we're into establishing habit formation with these people. So you want to give them the minimal effective dose. And so what is that? I really don't know. It really depends on the person. But I generally try to go with 1 to 2 activities, and I have them do 3 to 5 rounds of 5 breaths if it's that type of activity, or, you know, once or twice a day. Or if it's more, we're building power and capacity, I'm going to give them something to do 2-3 times a week. And for the most part, I'd say most people do their stuff. But let's say that's too much. Let's say they won't even do 1 exercise. I'm still going to put it on me, because it's clear that I gave them too much given their current state. So what do? I cut it down to 1 exercise, and I cut the volume way down until I can get to the point where they do that consistently for that week time period. All right? And sometimes that can be, hey, can you just get in this position and take 5 breaths? Sometimes I don't even get that. And if that's the case, I cut it down. It's like, look, can you, every once in a while, once a day, pick something up heavy as an example. I just need some type of habit that they're going to get into that will favorably impact that. So that's the hardest piece. And you know, when you even get someone who, when you've given them the lowest common denominator of something that could give them a favorable change in their life, and they still don't do that, then I think you have to have that conversation of what their expectations ought to be for rehab. And they need to be tempered. I mean, it's simple. And I've had that with a guy who will not do any home exercise whatsoever. And, you know, I've tried everything possible. Not gonna do it. And so we just make sure we get the most out of our sessions. But I also have tempered his expectation by saying, well, look, okay, you still hurt. Yeah, you're also, I can't get you to do anything at home. So you just have to understand that this probably will take a little bit longer, or you won't get the results you want. So just keep it real with your peeps, you know what I mean? So that's the biggest problem with home exercise execution. The second one is doing it correctly. And this is a much smaller problem, assuming you've given them good activities. Because a lot of times I'll give people things and do it like the exact opposite of what I had intended for them to do. But they're getting better nonetheless. And as long as you're getting a change that's favorable with your outcomes and whatever measures you're looking at, you're still probably in the clear, and it's more about fine-tuning from that point. But I think the biggest key to getting them to execute their programs favorably is to make sure you coach the hell out of them the first session, and make sure that they have a complete understanding of what needs to be done and what they need to accomplish in order to be successful. And you need to reinforce these activities by giving them something tangible to take with them at home, whether that's a videotape, which evidently that's, I didn't read the research article, but I came across this where they said that leads to better compliance than handouts. So I would videotape peeps on their smartphone if you can. Otherwise, handouts also are a thing. But you just want to give them as many reinforcements and chances as you can to allow them to execute the program technically sound. So figure out how they can do it and make sure that they do it first and foremost, number one. And number two, make sure that they do it well enough that they're going to get the changes that they need in order to be successful. So that's home exercise programs explained, I guess. All right, Danny, I appreciate you asking a question, girlfriend. So Danny on Instagram, who is also a phenomenal writer unto herself. You guys should check her out. She writes for Elite FTS. And she can lift some heavy shit. I've been watching. I'm like, damn, girl. Okay. So she said, right ischial tendonitis with negative bilateral adduction drop. Is sagittal plane really controlled? That's the question. So right ischial tendonitis with negative bilateral adduction drop. Is sagittal plane really controlled? So Danny, we might just have a conversation via Instagram if you're cool with that. What other tests, well, what I would ask you is, what sagittal tests would you look at that would let you know that sagittal plane was controlled? I'm gonna give Danny a moment, because I got a few things that I would think about to know if sagittal plane is controlled, and there's two tests that I look at to ensure that this is the case. Because a lot of times you'll see people where you restore frontal plane motion at the hips, but you still got to stick with sagittal. Actually, there's three things now that I'm thinking about it. So I'm going to give Danny just a little bit and see if she's got some ideas. And Danny, if you're saying I have no idea, please let me know, because otherwise I'm going to keep everybody hanging. Fat fingers, give me a break. Probably PRI squat, standing reach. I can dig both of those. And so now let's say, so for these people who don't know, because both of these are tests, so think a toe touch and a, mostly no idea. Come on, Danny, you totally know. So Danny suggested two tests to ensure that you have sagittal plane control. And the first one is a standing reach test, which would be a toe touch. So can you touch your toes? And so if I have someone who doesn't have sagittal control, right, but they have frontal plane hip mobility, if you see them and they still have, they can either touch their toes easily or they're palming the floor, more likely the latter, then you probably still have to emphasize a bit more sagittal plane. To follow on that test, so hang on, Danny says, I think I was on the assumption that if negative adduction drop, that position is restored, but I didn't take into effect the control component. 100%. So you would also look at the functional squat as another surrogate in that regard, which is definitely a sagittal plane activity. And if you got someone who can't get at least to a 3, which would be thighs, shit, you're not gonna be able to see me, thighs parallel. So I'm doing I got a crap in the wood squat and I can get to about here. Then you still probably can go get a little bit more sagittal plane. That would be another test you could look at. You could also look at straight leg raises. So this kind of follows to the standing reach test, but or the toe touch. But if I have someone who has hypermobile straight leg raises, and that could be 90 plus, might not be a bad idea to emphasize sagittal plane control. Another test that I've been looking at a lot more, kudos to Bill Hartman for exposing me to this, and this has really been guiding my treatment, is infrasternal angle. And so if you got someone who is narrow like me, and that's less than 90, or if you got someone who's got a very wide infrasternal angle, which would be 100 or more, you may want to think about establishing a bit more sagittal plane control with that person, because we want to hit 90, because that tells us they're probably in a good spot to have achieved a zone of apposition, and that gives us insight to saying, hey, these guys probably got sagittal plane. Other tests you could look at: if you are a PRI person, the Haruska AD and abduction lift test will let you know if someone's got sagittal plane. So if on the adduction lift test, yeah, I see you, girl. On the adduction lift test, if they have, if they can't get to like a 1 out of 5, or if they can get a 1 but not to a 2, maybe think it's still sagittal plane. And with the AB, if they can even lift up and get to a 1, probably think it's sagittal plane. If you're one of the peeps who use the active midstance test that I use, which is the test that I predominantly use to kind of give me, I feel like it gives me a little bit better information than the lifts, and it's more challenging. So then you got a little bit of a fail-safe built in. But if you can't get someone who, when they tuck their hips, they can't extend their hip to neutral, so keep everything in a straight line despite doing a posterior pelvic tilt, probably going to need some sagittal plane. That's definitely a big one that I see a lot. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at sagittal plane, and how long is that necessary. And in most cases, you could probably never get enough sagittal. But the big ones that I look at would be passive motion in the sagittal plane. I look at rib cage position. I look at squat. Can they touch their toes? And what's their active midstance look like? And if you keep getting boxes checked off that say this is good or this is not, that will give you decision-making capabilities in terms of, do I need to stay in the sagittal plane or do I need to move on to something else? And really, that's all treatment paradigms, or that's all things that you are going to intervene on with someone. If I'm looking at x-rays and I want to determine if someone's has a fracture, I definitely want to make sure I look at more than one view. Typically, you need 2 to make a confirmation of a diagnosis. So multiple angles lead to better decision making. And the same thing is true in physical therapy or rehabilitation. The more tests that I can do that are meaningful, the better information I have to make good decisions. And so too in strength conditioning. If I'm doing some type of sports science stuff where I'm looking at velocity-based training, and maybe I'm looking at a few other different things, and maybe I'm comparing side to side, or I'm doing power testing, strength testing, whatever, the more tests that you have that are meaningful, the better decision making you can make. And I mean, we even look at this too in functional medicine circuits, or if you're trying to make changes with pathology in terms of blood work and stuff like that. More good information is better. So look at a lot of different things and let that guide you to whatever decisions you have to make. So, Danny, thank you for asking a great question. That was awesome. Okay, the last question, unless someone else comes up with a question, is also from Rohan. What does physical therapy look like in 25 years? You bet, Danny. So Rohan asks, what do I see PT as in 25 years? I have no idea, honestly. First off, we'll say I have no idea because I am not clairvoyant. I can't predict the future. I could barely learn from the past. But I thought a lot about this question, and I think so much of what the profession that I'm in looks like in the future is dependent on healthcare, and that's from a large global standpoint. I think that we have a lot of good things going for us in the sense that we're inexpensive compared to a lot of other practitioners, one, but also a lot of other procedures. And with healthcare being incredibly costly, and I am certain that we are going to look at measures to cut costs, that's favorable for us. Because then maybe that lends us credence to being first line of care or point of care practitioners if someone has a musculoskeletal or maybe even like some type of neurological complaint that's latent. You know, maybe if you see someone who's had a stroke and maybe it's a few years later and they're like, hey, you know, maybe they might come to us. I don't know. You know, I don't know what that looks like. It really depends on if our scope can expand, which I hope it does. It's really good that almost all states have direct access, because that lends us to being in that first point of care kind of thing. I think it's really cool in the state of Wisconsin that they can actually order imaging now, which is a huge win for us. And we're also starting to do some procedures. You know, say what you want about dry needling. The fact that many states allow us to penetrate the skin, like that is huge. That is huge, because it's giving us more autonomy as a profession. It's giving us more options to help people, and it's giving us more power. It really is, in terms of things that are good for the profession in the long term. So I think that these are good things for us, and that lends me hopeful that I think in 25 years we could definitely be point of care practitioners. Now, what scares me about that healthcare double-edged sword is that reimbursement is declining, and we aren't necessarily making more money, and the cost of physical therapy school is skyrocketing. And so what's going to be challenging, I think, for us is, especially an outpatient, it's like, what if we go to the model where some physicians have to see one person for maybe 10 minutes at the most? And what if we have to see multiple people at once, which a lot of us have to do? Not me, though. Bam. That's why you got to go rural, outpatient, at a hospital setting, because I get one every 45. But point being is, like, if you're going to work in insurance, that is scary, because how can you give good quality care if you're seeing 4 patients at a time? It's tough. Like, I mean, I have a hard time paying attention to one camera in front of me, let alone 3. And I can't even imagine trying to give good quality of care when I'm seeing 4 patients at once. And I don't think you can. And, you know, in order to do well, that probably requires effective physical therapy assistance. And that takes training unto itself, because a lot of times it's really hard to find good physical therapists. So that kind of scares me, because I think that's probably the route that physio is going to go. That's why I do think that we will probably see a lot of more cash pay clients and clinicians in 25 years, because I really think, and I think about this for myself, that's really the only way I think we'll be able to be truly successful with a lot of the people we work with, because time is a huge commodity, and if you don't have that with someone, you can't intervene in a manner that's going to be optimal. Not only that, but I think too, if we can get access to more ways of intervening or collaborate with more people, then we can be even more successful. But it's time, man. You need time with people in order to be successful. And that's what intrigues me about cash pay practices. And I'll tell you, that's definitely what was one of my biggest intriguing points about being in the NBA. Was while I would have to see multiple people at once, or while I would only get a short amount of times in many cases to work with those guys, I saw them every day. And so it was still a wash, because I could get an hour session and, you know, 3 days, and we still made meaningful change. And not only that, but you can see how the course of treatment or the course of normal healing times would go. And not only that, but because we had more funds at our disposal, there were more ways for us to intervene and be successful. So I could do their rehab, and then I could either do their strength conditioning, and then I could do initiatives to help with sleep. I could take care of nutrition. In some cases we could do blood work. I mean, there was just a lot more ways that we could impact an individual favorably to lead to either better rehab outcomes or performing at a high level. And so that's kind of what I think is needed to be successful as a clinician or as a performance coach, or whatever your discipline is being able to attack a problem from multiple angles. And I don't know if that's going to be in physical therapy's future 25 years from now. And that's kind of sad, because I think having no time and depending on what our skill sets look like, that sorely limits us. So I just want to see if there's a question. No, there's not. Okay. So that's kind of my, I guess it kind of sounds like a bleak outlook for PT in 25, but the fact that we at least have the opportunity to be point of care practitioners, or the first person you see when you got a musculoskeletal complaint, regardless of what setting that is, that excites me, that motivates me, that keeps me going, that makes me want to pay off these damn student loans by traveling so I can get to the point where I can see people on that one-on-one basis, so I can have the time to do that. Not only that, so I can build up my skill set in multiple ways so I can better help these people. And I think that's a good stopping point for today, unless someone else has a question. Thank you all so much for listening in on number 17. It's been a phenomenal time chatting with you guys. And Danny, thanks again if you're still listening. Where can you learn more? First off, go to zachcouples.com, for crying out loud. That's where I put out content. That's where these debriefs go after it's all said and done. And there's just a lot of stuff out there. There's course notes, there's book notes, there's whatever I want to talk about. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get weekend learning goodies every Friday. Not only that, but you'll get a bunch of free stuff. Like an acute chronic workload calculator, a basketball conditioning program, lots of other cool things. So sign up for that. Also, I offer services on that website. So if you are an individual who needs a mentor or someone to bounce ideas off of, because that was by far the biggest thing that skyrocketed my trajectory, or at least expedited the process from me being from really suck to less suck. Mentors are critical, because that saves you time in terms of the trial and error process. So I offer that. I offer movement consultations. So if you got like some aches or pains and you've checked it out and it doesn't seem to be anything that's medically problematic, or maybe you just don't move as well as you'd like, I can take care of that. I also offer fitness and training programs. I'll tell you what, if you want to get better at sports, if you want to move better, if you want to go through fat loss, I would say those are like the 3 areas that I probably do okay at, or do more than okay. Go ahead and sign up on that. Also, post rehab. That's my jam, yo. If you want to build some conditioning post rehab, come see me there. Okay. So that's ZachCouples.com. Social media. Subscribe to me on that Instagram. That's you guys right there, Zach, Z-A-C Couples. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ZCouples. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is ZCouples. Also, subscribe to me on YouTube, youtube.com/users/couples performance, or just search Zach Couples and hit the subscribe button. A lot of times, guys, this is a dirty little secret. When I'm putting out a blog, and I put up a lot of videos, they usually go on YouTube first. Lucy, I appreciate you. Much love, by the way. But they usually go on YouTube first. So you might be able to get a sneak preview of what's going on the blog on Monday. So go to YouTube, guys. Otherwise, you guys all stay classy. I thank you for listening. Stay classy. Keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry. Stay learning. Stay moving. And I'll see you next time. Deuces.